Hello everyone, this is Ben, and today we're looking at a Test 2 IELTS essay. Many people aim to achieve balance between work and life. A balance would be slightly better there, but I don't make these questions. But only a few people achieve such a balance. Why is this problem happening? What are the solutions for this problem? Again, solutions to a problem. It's better, what are some potential solutions to a problem? But I don't write these, I just correct the responses to them. Let's have a look. It's a well-known fact that work-life balance is significantly essential in our life. But, there's a few issues here already. Just before we read, I'd recommend that you read it on your own and think about the scores that you would give it. I say this a lot. I try and remember to say it every video, but it is good practice to know. If you can read these essays and accurately suggest a score, you'll start to know whether or not you're ready to take the IELTS test to get the scores that you need. So that will help you in terms of self-reflection, which will be very important. Some students, I think, they lack confidence, even though they have very high ability, and the opposite is really very true sometimes. Some are very, very overconfident, and they can't understand why they're getting low scores. But the low scores, they should not be a mystery in those cases, because you can check what is required to get the highest scores and what's required to get the lowest scores. So based on that, I suggest that you read this, pause on each slide, and think about what scores you would give. I will give you my predictions at the end. And we'll see if we're thinking the same things. This is the first slide, introduction. Second, first body paragraph. Third, second body paragraph. And the conclusion as the fourth and final slide. So, going back, it's a well-known fact that work-life balance is significantly essential in our life, but unfortunately, there are a few people who are just working and taking a rest effectively. In the essay, the reasons for this issue and the possible solutions will be discussed. Okay, prepare myself mentally for this. Let's make it slightly better. A healthy work-life balance. Well, if something's essential, it's extremely important. We don't say significantly essential, we just say essential. You can say absolutely essential, possibly. But these two words don't go together, so, well, learn words which do go together. If you're putting words together which don't go together, please stop, because, it makes you look very, very non-native, but it's not just me being a snob about English, and I am a snob about English, I know that. I think language can be beautiful, and I want you to use it beautifully, but it will affect your score, because collocation means words that go together. You have to understand words that go together to get the highest scores. But yeah, I am a snob about English. Essential in our life. Well, we usually say in life or in our lives, because we don't all have one life, we all have different lives. But unfortunately, lazy spelling mistake, should be an E there. There are a few people who are just working and taking a rest effectively. Adjust is the wrong word. Balance. Taking a rest. Oh, that's horrible. I hear that a lot in the country I'm living in. It's a kind of expression people use here, which is very, very weird and unnatural and used incorrectly, even though it could potentially make a little bit of sense. We're talking about having enough leisure time in which people can relax, and having the balance between our personal lives and our working lives. I suppose you could extend that to studying. But taking a rest, we're really talking about having enough leisure time, having enough free time. Okay, so there are a few people who have let's say sufficient leisure time, sufficient enough, the amount that's needed to be healthy and do your work efficiently and productively. Have sufficient leisure time. In this essay, the reasons for this issue and possible solutions will be discussed. That's not bad. Possible solutions is good because they're never solutions until they work, and we don't know if they will work until we try them. So they're always possible solutions until they have been used and then have worked. If they work, they become solutions which worked. Until then, they're always potential solutions. They're always possible ones. That's good. To begin with, this is where the big problems start. There are a couple of causes related to this problem. Well, we have causes of a problem. Lack of work-life balance is a problem. Maybe I would use the word situation. We find ourselves in a situation where it's very difficult to achieve this balance. A couple of means two, and it's very informal. I'm going to tell you about a couple of three things. Various causes of this situation. First of all, a number of employees. Well, big number, a small number, a huge number of employees. And this is where the big problems start. Let's have a look. Thrown in at the deep end. This is supposed to be snowed under, but it was accidentally typed showed under, snowed under. Get off work, knock off, get off, put their feet up at home. Have a lot on their plate. So these are very idiomatic and informal. Do not use idiomatic language. In the writing component. Speaking a little bit can be okay if it's used naturally and correctly. And to get the very highest scores, you'd have to use some idiomatic language. You wouldn't necessarily have to use loads of idioms thrown together like this. But for writing, it's just not the right style. And I honestly don't understand how students can think this is appropriate. If they've done any bit of basic research about what's required. But for me, it's just common sense too. You know, it must be the same in any language. If you're writing an essay for a university professor, you're not just going to use lots of informal speaking style language. You know, there's an expectation that you're going to follow the conventions of academic writing, and there are many conventions, and you don't use this kind of language. So a lot of this we're just going to ignore. Thrown at the deep end and suffer too much from jobs that they cannot deal with, suffer from too much stress in the jobs they cannot deal with. It's not very clear. Suffer mental stress, suffer mental anguish. I don't know. But, you know, suffer from a job is not correct, is it? Suffer. Suffer exhaustion, suffer burnout. Of heavy workloads. Workload is the amount of work you have to do that they cannot deal with. I see this a lot. People just trying to claim they're doing different ideas or developing them, but they just say the same ideas again and again. If you are snowed in under your work, you're not snowed in under your work. You're snowed under with work. or you just snowed under. That's not a result. You're just saying the same thing. So if you say people have a lot of work they can't deal with, that means being snowed under with work. So it's not as a result, it's just saying the same thing and pretending it's developing it. It's not developing it. In addition, some people tend to work in the office until after other peers. You don't have other peers, you don't have other friends, you don't have other classmates, you have classmates. You have colleagues, they are your peers. You are not one of your peers, so how can they be other peers? I'm seeing this a lot recently. I've seen this a lot recently, and I really, really hate it. Like other friends, other classmates. They are peers until after their peers. I mean, it's really colleagues, isn't it? You know, peers is very general. Why be general when we can be specific? They're colleagues. Get off work is very, very informal again. After their colleagues leave work, something more neutral, leave work. But if you're saying after all their colleagues leave work, it sounds like this is an uncommon problem for just a few people. Everyone else leaves and these few people keep working. So it doesn't make it sound like a general problem affecting a huge number of employees. So think about the argument to put their feet up. Yes, it means, relax with your feet elevated, especially. Put your feet up at home or on the beach. If you're on the sofa, for example, you put your feet up. Fine for speaking. Again, it's not a consequence if they're choosing to stay in the office. They're not home, so they can't relax. But it's not really talking about a next step as a consequence of this, in my opinion. Just they cannot spend enough time relaxing at home. Sometimes they go to work on the weekends. Okay. Sometimes they go to work a little bit informal. They are even expected to work on weekends or on the weekend. Why say this is because with a short sentence when you can just make a long sentence with because, keeping the same sentence going. But again, this is because they always have a lot on their plate. You've kind of said that, twice, 3 times already? Too much work they can't deal with, snowed under. A lot on their plate means a lot to do, so it's not a new point, it's just saying the same thing in different ways. They work on weekends basically because they haven't done all the work that their boss expects them to do by Friday at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., whatever it is. So let's say to ensure that all deadlines are met, all deadlines have been met. My green pen is always about style. I don't like talking about low-scoring essays, but sometimes I just see an issue, and the issue affects actually quite a large number of students. And using the wrong register is like level of formality, is actually quite common, but it's very rare where it's like this, where it's just throwing idioms at me in the writing. A lot on their plate. It's like it's almost like the writer is trying to show off that they understand these idioms, even though it's completely inappropriate for the writing. It's like, look, I can use these idioms. I can just list them one after the other. So it's very rare that you see an essay which encapsulates one particular problem so much. So that's why I felt I had to show you this one. Usually it's just once or twice people misunderstand that something is idiomatic and they misunderstand the expectations of academic writing, but it's very rare when it's so extreme like this. I've seen it before, but not very often. Next, difference, this paragraph, but not any better. There's less idiomatic language. There are one or two instances. See if I can find one. Working out is very casual. Exercising. If you want to be neutral. If you want to be quite formal, in a way that you wouldn't use for speaking, only writing, taking exercise. But the big problem with this is understanding, and that's my blue pen. We've had my green pen style, now we've got my blue pen. A blue pen, it's when there's an issue with meaning, like the wrong word is used, or I just can't understand something because it's not clear enough. So to resolve this problem, government and each person who works should try to make varied disciplines between work and life together. So I can't understand that, and I can't understand that in a way where I can figure it out in a short time. If I spent like 20 minutes thinking really hard about it, I could probably figure it out. But it's not my job to do that. So in these cases, I just put a question mark. And I don't like doing that. I'm kind of a perfectionist. I like to change everything. But sometimes it's either impossible or it's not worth the time it would take. I like to say I can meet you halfway. Like if you're halfway right and halfway wrong, I'll meet you in the middle. But if you're like way off where you have to be, if you're here and I have to meet you here, then I feel that you're not working hard enough. You're not working hard enough to get to a point where I can understand you. And that is not my issue, that's your issue. So to resolve this problem, the government and each individual who works, each working person, so maybe we can say company employee. Because it's not everyone who works. If you work for yourself, like you run your own business, you can choose when you take time off. So you don't have to answer to anyone. But if you're an employee, you have bosses, you have an employer, the company. So that might be better based on what's been said already. I don't understand the next part, as I told you. We'll skip that. Firstly, governors have to administrate to control the work system. I don't know what that means. Yeah, administrate kind of means govern, but not in this context. Work system doesn't make sense to me. What kind of system are we talking about? Are we talking about the business model of a particular business? Are we talking about labelers? Governors, I understand that the writer doesn't want to keep repeating words, the government. But this is interesting because the government hasn't been used yet. But I think the writer is thinking that here it is. Yeah, everyone's going to say government, so I have to say something else. But governors just has a different meaning. Like, if you go to the US, there are governors of the state. There's a governor of Florida, for example, or a governor of another state, but it has a very specific meaning. You're not talking about all politicians. You're not talking about the government. The governor just has particular responsibilities and isn't really going to be in a position maybe to change the whole system of labelers. So I'll leave it, but it's not the right word, is it? The government have to, let's say, pass new labelers, enact new labelers, basically create new laws immediately. Not which can, which will. Lead many companies to improve the environment. Well, not lead them to, but require, legally require them to improve their work environment. But are we specifically talking about limiting weekly working hours? Because I think we are, so that people don't work late in the office and, come in on the weekend, at least without being paid a lot of extra money and not being forced to do it, being made optional for a lot of extra money. So improve their work environment. It's not work environment, is it? That's the physical area and the mood. So it's the work conditions, which is more general. That includes things like pay and working hours. Improve their work conditions and decrease the sum of the jobs. No, the workload. We talked about the workload. Everyone's got different workloads. Let's say the average workload. That employees have to do, or just of employees, their workloads, so the workloads of employees. Secondly, not only government, the government's a unique thing, so we say that not only the government, but also each worker. Has to make some self-discipline. I don't understand what that means. Take some responsibility, maybe? For instance, there are a variety of methods, not in order to spend our free time, just how we can spend our free time. There are a variety of methods to spend our free time, not our own time, our free time after work, such as exercising at the gym or going on holidays with family. Okay, so what? Saying there are lots of possible ways isn't making a point. What's the point? I'll make a point. And individuals must use their very limited leisure time. Sorry, it's a bit messy. It says leisure there. Their leisure time efficiently. Not wasting it, making the most of it. And prioritize. So choose the most important things. Prioritize what is most important to them. So is what is most important to them with their particular priorities, going to the gym, getting a six-pack? Is it spending lots of quality time with family? We need to decide what our priorities are and make sure that we are using our leisure time accordingly to focus on those priorities. In conclusion, regarding to failure of, regarding plus noun, regarding the failure of work-life balance, well, it's not failure of, it's failure to achieve, failure by people to achieve a work-life balance. Both governments in the world and individuals should be aware of this issue and causes, and then they must try to enhance our lifestyles and work effectively. Means absolutely nothing to me, just what I would call waffle. People just thinking that saying words, trying to sound vaguely academic and formal is going to impress someone, even though it basically has no meaning. Avoid waffle, please. What would I give this? Not very high scores. Overall 4 with 4 for each. Why? Task response. Presents the main ideas but difficult to identify. Definitely, yeah. Definitely. Especially in the second body paragraph, I didn't understand a lot of the key points. So I think the key point is changes have to be made. The government needs some new labour laws, and that will help. But also, people have to take responsibility for prioritising what's most important in their lives. But that was not very clear from the body paragraph. So that's a key example. This one, obviously the language was completely inappropriate, but for task response, it's disguising, repeating the same point as making new points. You can say that people have too much work in 3 ways, but you're basically making the same point 3 times. It's not developing your idea, it's just repeating the idea in different ways. It's not good. What's next? Sorry, that was task achievement. Next is coherence and cohesion. 4 again. Presents information and ideas, but not coherently, no clear progression in the response. Well, no clear progression, that's key for me. If you're repeating the same thing using slightly different words, that's not progression. It's just one single thing. So you could stop probably... Okay, you could just say this and this, and you wouldn't lose anything in the meaning. You could just take a small part of this and none of the meaning would be lost, and that should never be happening. Too much work, can't relax enough, but said in several different ways. Just to remind you, thrown at the deep end, snowed under, have a lot on their plate. Basically the same thing. They have excessively heavy workloads. Just say it once, that's fine. Lexical resource. So, main idea is difficult to identify, no clear progression. Lexical resource. Basic vocabulary. Sometimes I can't understand the vocabulary, but it's definitely inappropriate. I don't need to go over this again, do I? All this idiomatic language just thrown at me. And, okay, trying to be a bit more adventurous with the language here in a way that's not informal, but just using words which I can't understand easily, like work system. Work system doesn't make sense because it's not like the education system, because all companies kind of have their own systems, don't they? They have their own business models and they have their own corporate culture, I guess. They have their own ways of operating and their own working environment. So what would the work system mean? I think we're talking about laws, labour laws, I think. So where are we? Grammatical range and accuracy. I mean, yeah, there are some efforts to use subordination, but there are a lot of errors. I would say errors predominating is characteristic of this. You can kind of find the candidate's real ability with sentences like this. Sometimes they go to work on weekends. Very, very limited, let's say. And certainly if the candidate is trying to make longer sentences, it's either not understandable because of the vocab or the kind of particular grammar being used is not correct, or the style is just not appropriate. But yeah, I'm looking at the grammar. It's very limited, as you would expect if all the other things are 4. It's not likely that this would be much higher, you know. Learning a language doesn't really work that way. You kind of expect them to all go up together. So I wonder how similar your predictions were to mine. As always, feel free to leave comments or ask questions by writing a comment under the video. As always, thank you for reading and watching. Thank you for possibly reading on the screen, listening to me, or watching the video.